My ex-boyfriend invited me to his wedding mostly just to show off his rich fiancée. But the person I brought along as my plus one ended up flipping the whole situation on its head in a way no one expected. Ryan and I met when we were both working part-time at Starbucks. He was 28 at the time and I was 20. Back then I was still in college trying to save up enough cash to finally move out of my parents' house for good. Ryan, meanwhile, was chipping away at his student loans. His folks had gotten themselves into a lot of debt because of their gambling problems, so they couldn't really help him out. At first, we connected by talking about our messed up family situations, but pretty soon we just realized we genuinely liked being around each other. 3 years later, I'd graduated and managed to save enough to get a place of my own. Ryan was still stuck living with his parents, barely keeping up with his loan payments. So I told him he could move in with me. But the truth was, with all that debt, he couldn't even afford half the rent. I told him I'd cover 70% and he could just pay the other 30%. He didn't hesitate to say yes. We split the utility bills evenly though. We had different kinds of jobs. Mine was a corporate gig where I could work from home if I wanted, as long as I hit my monthly targets. Ryan's job was more physical. He had to be on site for long hours, which meant he wasn't around much to help with things at home. Because of that, most of the chores landed on me, doing the dishes, laundry, cleaning, cooking, you name it. I didn't complain much because I knew his job wore him out. The one thing I asked of him? Take out the trash. He always ate last anyway, so it just made sense. But he kept forgetting. Every morning I'd wake up and see the trash still there, so I'd end up dragging it out myself. One weekend I had to work. When I came back home, the place was an absolute mess. The kitchen was covered in dirty dishes, empty food wrappers, and chocolate packets. The laundry was piled up and the trash still hadn't been touched. I was fuming. I was wiped out from work and just wanted to crash, but I couldn't relax seeing the house like that. So I spent the rest of my day cleaning everything up, hoping he'd at least notice and appreciate it. When Ryan finally got home, he gave me a hug and said he missed me. But he didn't notice the clean house at all. He just plopped down in front of the TV to catch his game. That really hit me. I felt invisible. All I wanted was a little recognition. I broke down crying. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe I was sleep deprived, or maybe it was just the realization that he really didn't value what I did. He glanced over and asked if I was okay. I just shook my head and said I was going to bed. Before I left, I reminded him, again, to take the trash out. He nodded. But surprise, surprise, next morning, the trash was still there. When he came into the kitchen and asked what was for breakfast, I snapped. I told him if he wanted food, he could make it himself. He told me I was being rude, and that's when I lost it. I yelled at him for being completely useless around the house. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind and told me not to be so dramatic. I took a deep breath and asked him straight up, why couldn't he just take the trash out? He said he forgot. I asked him, besides drinking beer in front of the TV, what else did he actually do at home? He started talking about how exhausted he always was and how he needed time to unwind. I nodded. Fair enough, he needed time. But what about me? I reminded him that I came home from work and went straight into cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, ironing his shirts, the whole 9 yards. And all I asked in return was for him to take the trash out. Then he said something that made my blood boil. He told me he never asked me to do any of that. He said his job was hard, and as his girlfriend, I should have just known to help him out. He even tried to compare it to how his mom used to do everything for his dad. That was it for me. I looked him straight in the eye and told him I wasn't his mom, and I sure as hell wasn't going to keep acting like one. From that point on, I said he'd be cooking his own meals, doing his own laundry, ironing his own shirts, taking out his own trash, and cleaning up after himself. He looked shocked and tried to protest, but I stopped him. I told him there was more. He'd also need to pay half the rent now or move out. He stared at me like I'd lost it and asked where all this was coming from. I told him I was just done working myself into the ground for someone who couldn't even say, thank you. He opened his mouth to argue, but I was already out the door. I was late for work anyway. That was the first time I ever stood up for myself like that, and honestly, I didn't feel one bit guilty. After that, I stuck to my word. I only cleaned up after myself. It was actually kind of satisfying watching him scramble to find clean clothes or a pressed shirt in the morning. He let the dishes pile up, thinking I'd cave and wash them, but I didn't. When they started to stink, I just ordered takeout and tossed the containers, no need to even step into the kitchen. He kept trying to talk to me, telling me that being a good partner meant taking care of him. But I stood my ground. I wasn't budging. When rent came due, I paid my 50% and told the landlord Ryan would be paying the rest. He came back fuming, demanding I go back to paying 70% like before. I told him no way, I wasn't doing that anymore. He didn't appreciate it then, so I wasn't about to start again. He made a few excuses, but in the end he had to cough up his share of the rent. Not once did he apologize. Not once did he sit me down and admit he'd taken me for granted. Looking back, I wish I'd seen it all sooner. Over the next few months, things just got worse. The fights escalated and he kept trying to gaslight me into being the old me again. I got a promotion at work, and that seemed to push Ryan over the edge. One of our mutual friends, who also happened to be my coworker, must have mentioned it to him, because that night turned into the worst fight we ever had. Ryan came home drunk, shaking me awake, saying we had to talk. I could tell he'd been drinking pretty hard, probably celebrating with my friends that night, even though it had nothing to do with him. I was half asleep and told him we could talk in the morning, but he wouldn't let it go, kept saying it was important. Tired and annoyed, I sat up just to get it over with. I asked him what could be so urgent that he had to wake me up in the middle of the night. And that's when Ryan started rambling, slurring his words about some woman he met at work. I already knew who he was talking about, Sierra. I'd seen her once at one of his office parties when he took me along. She was young, probably still in her early 20s, and came from serious money. Her dad was some big-shot industrialist, and the only reason she even had a job was because he wanted her to build character or something. Ryan kept going on about how he was falling for her. According to him, she was a real woman, unlike me. I just stared at him, completely numb. I didn't even feel hurt like I probably should have. At that point, our relationship had been on life support for months. We weren't really a couple anymore, just two people sharing rent. He kept talking about his feelings for her, but I stopped him mid-sentence. I told him flat out, I didn't care if he was seeing someone else. In fact, I was glad. I suggested we break up peacefully and that he should start looking for a new place as soon as he could. He stared at me, totally confused, and asked if I was jealous of Sierra. I just smiled, shook my head, and said no, I was actually relieved. His new relationship gave me the perfect reason to let go without feeling guilty. Ryan didn't take that well. His face turned red, and he started shouting, accusing me of being cocky because of my new promotion. I told him my raise had nothing to do with it. What did matter was that I'd finally seen things clearly. We just weren't a good fit anymore. We weren't partners in any real way. We were roommates and nothing more. I even said I understood why he was drawn to someone else. I thought he'd be happy to hear that. Instead, he blew up. He went on a tirade about how he hated modern women who cared more about their careers than settling down. He said Sierra was the better woman because all she wanted was to get married and raise kids. I stayed calm and reminded him that not every woman wants the same things. Sierra was born into money, so maybe she didn't have to care about building a career, but I did. And I liked my job. Then I told him straight, if he wanted a woman like Sierra, he should go be with her. There was no point arguing. He should move out as soon as he could. His eyes widened like I'd just slapped him, and he asked how I planned to afford rent on my own. I told him about the raise. I explained that I could now easily pay the full rent without needing a roommate. That really set him off. He started yelling that I was just trying to show off. Then he started comparing me to Sierra again, said she was richer, had her own house, and that her dad bought it for her. He accused me of needing to change. Said men didn't want strong, independent women, they wanted housewives. According to him, a woman who earned more than a man was bound to ruin everything. At that point, I'd had enough. I told him to shut up, that I wasn't arguing with him anymore, not in the middle of the night. I gave him until the end of the month to pack up and leave. Until then, he could sleep on the couch. He kept grumbling as I walked off, but I ignored it and went back to bed. Over the next week, he started packing up his stuff little by little. I could feel a weight lifting. The thought of having the place all to myself actually made me excited. But on his last night, I came home and found both Ryan and Sierra sitting on the couch. I looked at him, confused, and he told me he brought her over so she could see where he used to live. I was stunned. The audacity to bring another woman into my home, our home, without even asking? And he knew I'd be back that evening. Still, I didn't want to be rude to Sierra. This wasn't her fault, at least as far as I knew. So I greeted her politely. But to my surprise, she looked me up and down like I was dirt and didn't even respond. I decided not to let it get to me. I went to wash up. Later, while I was making some pasta for myself in the kitchen, Sierra came in to get water. She stood there watching me like I was an animal in a cage. It was weird. I asked her if she needed something, but she just gave me that same judgmental stare. So I ignored her and focused on cooking. I planned to take my food to my room and eat in peace. After dinner, I started heading back downstairs, but then I overheard them talking. Sierra was saying how lucky Ryan was to have upgraded from someone who looked like me. I stopped cold on the stairs. Ryan laughed and agreed. Then she asked him why he ever dated me in the first place. And Ryan said something that shattered me. He said he only got with me because I was easy to manipulate, someone who'd pay for dates and lend him money when we were in school. He bragged about how I covered more than half the rent for years, which let him save up a ton of cash. I just stood there in silence. I'd always had this nagging suspicion he was taking advantage of me, but hearing him admit it out loud felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. They kept talking, kept mocking me. Everything from how I looked to how I lived, nothing was off limits. I wanted to cry right then and there, but I wasn't about to let them see that. So I crept back to my room and cried into my pillow, quietly, all night. The next morning, they were both gone. Ryan had taken the last of his stuff and finally moved out. I wandered around the house in a daze, realizing I was finally free. And honestly, I'd never felt so light. I cried again, but this time they were happy tears. I even danced around the house. Then I cleaned every corner, making sure there was no trace of him left behind. In the weeks that followed, I truly enjoyed living alone. I stopped caring about the awful things Ryan and Sierra said. I felt good. Everything was peaceful until about 2 months later. One day at work, our mutual friend came up to me and said Ryan was getting married to Sierra. I was caught off guard. It felt sudden. He showed me their engagement pictures and they looked genuinely happy. Sure, it stung a little realizing how long I'd been used. But deep down, I also knew I would have never been happy with him. So I was actually okay. Genuinely okay that he'd found someone else. That night, when I got home and checked the mailbox, I found an envelope that made my jaw drop. It was a wedding invitation. From Ryan and Sierra. At first, I thought maybe Ryan sent the invitation by mistake, or maybe it was just some polite gesture. But then I opened the envelope and saw a handwritten note in the corner of the card. It said, "I want you to come to my wedding so you can see the amazing life I'm about to have with Sierra." That's when it hit me, he hadn't invited me out of kindness. He just wanted to rub his wealth, his new partner, and his fancy future in my face. I sat there, taking a deep breath, trying to figure out how someone I once cared for could be so petty. After everything I did for him over the years, how could he be this cruel? All the resentment I'd buried came boiling to the surface. And right then and there I decided I was going to get a little petty too. I said yes. And I marked down that I'd be bringing a +1. A plan started forming in my mind. I was going to make Ryan wish he'd never sent me that invitation. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up Sierra's social media pages. Scrolled through every post, every photo she'd ever uploaded. And then, jackpot. Just 5 months ago, Sierra had broken up with her long-term boyfriend, Ethan. They'd been together since high school, judging by the pictures, so I knew this breakup must have hit hard. I sent Ethan a friend request. When he accepted, I messaged him right away. To my surprise, he replied. We started talking. I didn't beat around the bush. I told him I was Ryan's ex and laid out my whole plan. I explained that I wanted to take him as my +1 to Ryan and Sierra's wedding. Ethan was curious, understandably. So I told him everything. Over the next couple weeks, we kept chatting. He opened up about how Sierra had cheated on him more than once. Turns out, her latest affair? That was with Ryan. I hadn't known any of this. Ethan told me Sierra had always been into older guys. So when she suddenly claimed to be in love with Ryan even while she and Ethan were still together, he wasn't exactly shocked. Their breakup was ugly. He blocked her everywhere. Even then, she tried to say they could still be friends. From the way he talked, I could tell he still had feelings for her. I also shared my side of the story, how Ryan used me for years, how he never appreciated anything I did, and how he and Sierra mocked me the night before he moved out. Ethan was stunned. He said he never realized Ryan was that kind of guy. After hearing it all, he agreed to come with me. I couldn't wait to see the look on Ryan and Sierra's faces. The day of the wedding came. As soon as Ryan saw me walking in with Ethan, his face dropped. He immediately recognized him, Sierra's ex. We didn't give him the time of day. Just smiled and headed to our assigned seats like everything was fine. A minute later, Ryan stormed over and hissed at me, asking why I brought him. I just smiled again. He couldn't cause a scene with all those guests watching. So he had to bite his tongue and walk back down the aisle, shooting daggers at me the whole time. When the ceremony started, everyone stood up to watch Sierra walk in. She looked gorgeous, wearing a white gown, holding her dad's arm. The ceremony went off without a hitch, and afterward we all moved to the reception area. Sierra must have changed outfits, because when she walked in wearing a new dress, she still hadn't noticed me or Ethan sitting there. But the moment she did, she froze. She stared straight at Ethan, then glanced at me, back at him, totally confused. Then she blurted out, "Ethan? What are you doing here?" Before he could answer, I spoke up, smiling. "I invited him. We wanted to support you on your special day." Sierra's expression turned to pure rage. She looked at Ethan and asked, "Are you two dating now?" Ethan didn't even answer. It was such a ridiculous question. Her face turned red. Ethan calmly asked if they could talk in private. She nodded and gave me a death stare before walking off with him. I looked over and saw Ryan watching us like a hawk. He looked nervous, but he couldn't do anything. Not right then. Not in front of everyone. The party kept going. People danced, drank, laughed. But an hour passed and there was still no sign of the bride. Guests started to whisper. You could feel the tension building. Sierra's dad looked worried and asked one of the bridesmaids to go find her. A minute later, the bridesmaid came running in, clutching a note. She stood up in front of everyone and read it out loud. Sierra had left. She said seeing Ethan again stirred up all the feelings she thought she buried, and that marrying Ryan was a mistake. The whole place went dead silent. The note explained that she was leaving with Ethan. She couldn't go through with the marriage. Gasps echoed around the room. Guests stood frozen. Some in shock, some not sure what to do next. And there was Ryan alone standing in front of the crowd, humiliated beyond belief. Honestly, I didn't expect things to go that far. I brought Ethan just to rattle Ryan a bit, not blow up his whole wedding. But watching him standing there, totally stunned, stripped of the pride and ego he once wore like armor. Yeah, I felt a little bad. But only a little. Because the truth is, Ryan invited me to humiliate me. He wanted to show me how much better off he was. Instead, the whole thing blew up in his face. The wedding that was supposed to show off his happy ending became the scene of his biggest failure. After posting my story online, I started getting a lot of mixed reactions. A bunch of folks agreed with what I did. But some said I might have gone too far. I figured I should clear a few things up. First off, it was never my plan to wreck Ryan's wedding. When I asked Ethan to come with me, we never once talked about breaking anything up. I honestly had no clue what Sierra and Ethan talked about that day that made her run off. All I wanted was to be a little petty. After all, Ryan invited me just to show off how he was marrying into money. I didn't have anything to do with Sierra's decision to leave. I texted Ethan later, asking what exactly happened between them. Update: Ethan got back to me. He sent me a long message yesterday, saying how thankful he was that I brought him along that day. Turns out, he and Sierra actually went on the honeymoon that she was supposed to take with Ryan. They also talked to her parents, who were super worried about her at first. Ethan said he'd explain everything in person soon. Meanwhile, Ryan wouldn't leave me alone. He kept blowing up my phone, calling over and over, sending nasty texts blaming me for the wedding falling apart. I didn't answer a single one. I knew deep down I hadn't caused any of it. Sierra made her own choices. Then Ryan decided to show up at my front door. It was the weekend, so he knew I'd be home. At first, I refused to answer. I just shouted through the door, telling him to leave. But he wouldn't quit yelling until I came out. So I opened the door just a crack, told him he wasn't stepping inside, and that he could say whatever he needed to say from the porch. Ryan started screaming that I'd ruined his life. Apparently, he'd already quit his job, thinking he'd marry Sierra and never have to work again. Now he was furious at me, demanding to know why I had to bring Ethan to their wedding. I was starting to lose my patience. So I told him straight. I heard everything that night he thought he was whispering about me to Sierra. Every nasty thing. Every selfish thing. He looked stunned. I told him that I paid his rent for years. That I covered our dates. That I did all of it because I loved him, even though he never respected me. I told him even after he cheated on me with Sierra, I didn't interfere. The only reason I showed up to that wedding was because he invited me to flaunt his new, better life. He had no right to be standing on my porch blaming me now. I reminded him Sierra's an adult. She made her own choices. If he's mad at someone, he should take it up with her. He tried to scream back that it wasn't his fault. I was too naive to see he'd been using me all along. Said I shouldn't punish him for the past. I just scoffed. He kept going, ranting about how Sierra was supposed to change his life, how he worked so hard to win her over, and how I ruined everything. At that point, I'd had enough. I told him to get off my property or I'd call the police. He laughed at first, saying I wouldn't dare. So I pulled out my phone and started dialing right in front of him. That got his attention. He backed off quick, mumbling that I was overreacting as he hurried away. I slammed the door shut behind him, swearing to myself it would be the last time I ever saw his face. After that, I blocked him everywhere. I told my family about what happened too, just in case. I'm planning to change my locks and install a camera at my front door. If Ryan ever comes back, I'll have proof to report him. Update 3, 2 months later. It's been a month since everything went down. Work's been keeping me busy, so I hadn't had a chance to update everyone who kept asking about Ethan. Well, I'm happy to report, yes, we finally met up. Ethan invited me to lunch about a week ago, saying he was ready to sit down and talk. When I got there, to my surprise, Sierra was sitting next to him. I braced myself, thinking she might start something. But she didn't. When she saw me, she smiled politely and greeted me warmly. I wasn't sure what was going on, but Ethan assured me she just wanted to apologize. And she did. Sierra apologized sincerely for how she treated me before. Then she opened up about everything that happened with Ryan. She told me Ryan had always been super nice to her at work. Always giving her attention, always finding reasons to hang around. He would constantly complain about me, saying he was miserable in our relationship. He even told her he wished he had a better-looking girlfriend like her. Sierra admitted that during a rough patch with Ethan, she let herself get swept up by Ryan's flattery. She confessed that she hooked up with Ryan once. After that, Ryan pressured her to dump Ethan, telling her Ethan wasn't good enough. She said she felt guilty about cheating but eventually convinced herself maybe she could have a future with Ryan. At first, she thought maybe it could work, even though there was a big age gap. But when she saw me back then, so independent and self-sufficient, it made her feel insecure. She admitted feeling jealous that I didn't need a man to take care of me. I appreciated her honesty. I told her a bit about my own journey, how hard I'd worked to get where I am. She nodded, looking down, seeming genuinely regretful. Then I asked about the wedding, what happened that day. Sierra said when she saw Ethan sitting there, it hit her how much she still loved him. She realized she didn't feel anything close to that for Ryan. When they talked privately, Ethan confessed he felt the same way. So together, they made the decision to leave. She left a note for her family and they ran away to be together. Since then, they've stayed together. Her parents, though upset at first, eventually accepted it. She also mentioned she was working on filing for an annulment from Ryan. Hearing all that, it didn't feel perfect, but it felt like at least two people found some happiness out of all that mess. Sierra and Ethan looked genuinely happy together. We finished lunch, chatted a little more, then went our separate ways. Since that day, I haven't kept in touch with either of them, and honestly, I don't plan to. I'm focused on myself now. I'm working hard, looking forward to whatever's next in life. As for Ryan, well, I just hope he figures out someday that chasing people for their money won't ever fill the hole inside him.